Good evening, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 220. As always, I'm going to start us off with a bit of a tune.
Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed. Go bind your sons to exile, to serve your captives' need, to wait in heavy harness on flooded folk and wild. Your new God's sullen peoples have devil and have child. Take up the white man's burden, in patience to abide, to veil the threat of terror and check the show of pride. By open speech and simple, 100 times made plain, to seek another's profit and work another's gain. Take up the white man's burden, the savage wars of peace. Fill full the mouth of famine and bid the sickness cease. And when your goal is nearest, the end for others sought, what's love that heed and folly? Bring all your hopes to naught. Take up the white man's burden, no tawdry rule of kings, but toil of serf and sweeper, the tale of common things. The ports ye shall not enter, the roads ye shall not tread. Go make them with your living and mark them with your dead. Take up the white man's burden and reap his old reward. The blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye guard. The cry of those ye humor are slowly towards the light. Why brought ye us from bondage, a loved Egyptian night? Take up the white man's burden, ye dare not stoop to less, nor call too loud on freedom to cloak your weariness. By all ye cry or whisper, by all ye leave or do, the silent, sullen people shall wail gods and you. Take up the white man's burden, have done with childish days, the lightly prophet laurel, the easy young grudge praise. Come down to search your manhood through all the thankless years. No age with give what wisdom, the judgment of your peers. Take off the white man's burden through all the thankless years.
And that was, of course, the excellent Chris Gard. Do go and check out his YouTube channel. He's got some really good music on there, including quite a lot of more contemporary stuff as well as that. But he is a friend of ours. He's a friend of the channel, and his political ideas are in line with those of most of my guests in the audience. No guests so far this evening, although I know Mitch is joining us. And here we do have Hitman as well, I'm happy to say. Good evening, Hitman. You're just in time, mate. How are you going?
Oh, I'm all right, thank you. Sorry I'm a little bit late. I'm meant to get in a bit earlier, but
that's okay.
You're right.
I saw you were streaming yourself earlier. was that another one of your series on Iran?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, it was.
If
Unfortunately,
you want to talk about that for a minute, so people can go and check it out.
yes, I'm doing a series on modern Iran. So that's with my friend Hunger, the dye merchant. So unfortunately, he had some technical issues today, so we had to bail about halfway through the stream. So half of that ended up me being solo. I was mostly looking at the Middle Safavid dynasties, looking at Abbas the Great, and his accomplishments. And of course, I'll be carrying on further with that series up until, at the very least, until the death of Ayatollah Khomeini. So if you find that interesting, you can give that a watch. And I've got many other interesting streams behind the paywall, so join my channel for that.
Yeah, it's an interesting and topical subject at the moment, of course, because there's still a reasonable chance that the Americans and very possibly the British will find themselves in a war with Iran. I hope it doesn't happen, but it is still possible at the moment.
No, we are. Well, when they call us the little Satan and the Americans the great Satan, well, considering our behaviour towards them, I think there is some justification in that label. So
yeah, look, I don't get me wrong. I don't support any British involvement in Middle Eastern wars. I did support the Royal Navy keeping navigation free in the Red Sea and the Gulf. That's fine as far as I'm concerned. But actually bombing Iran or other land targets, I'm certainly not in favor of that at all. Because I don't think it does much good apart from anything else.
No. Sonny Jim's mentioned about India's stance on Gaza, but from what I've seen, many Indians are pro-Israel because they see it as an alliance against the Muslims, essentially. Because obviously, India doesn't like Pakistan, and we might be talking about that because there's a kind of a conflict brewing in that part of the world.
Yeah, I've got my own view about this is that we should be encouraging all of the Pakistanis and Indians resident in Britain and other Western nations to go home and go and fight in that war. I think we should encourage them all to do so. And,
no, exactly.
Don't get me wrong. I am against conflicts in the world. I am in no sense supporting war. But if India and Pakistan feel that they have to go at each other's throats, I think all those Pakistanis and Indians in Britain and in other countries, they should go home and go fight.
No, and I also personally think that, India and Pakistan have sat on their nuclear arsenals for far too long. I think if they gave them a good testing, that'd be good for nuclear research,
But yeah, providing they don't kill anyone, obviously, because we don't support violence on this channel at all. I don't know. I think, given that more British Muslims have joined the Islamic State than have ever joined the British Armed Forces, I would suggest that this is a perfect opportunity for Pakistanis in Britain and Indians in Britain to go and be patriotic and go home.
No, absolutely. You got to go and fight the good fight.
Absolutely. I mean, it's always amusing to me that India and Pakistan both have nuclear weapons, and yet they both still take millions of pounds and other Western currencies in overseas aid, despite the fact they can afford to have nuclear weapons.
And the space program.
In India's case, they not only do they have nuclear weapons, they have a space program, and they can build their own aircraft carriers. So why on earth they need British taxpayers' aid money is completely beyond me, because obviously they must have loads of spare cash sloshing around to afford their space program and building aircraft carriers and holding nuclear weapons. And both India and Pakistan buy the latest jets. Or nearly the latest jets, I should say. And in India's case, they build their own. You would think they wouldn't really need overseas aid. And as Davey's pointing out in the chat, for ages, people were saying they were going to be a superpower by 2020, which I don't think they quite managed. But, I also thought Sorry, you carry on, Hima.
What I was going to say is, I mean, can you really become a superpower when a third of your population shit in the streets?
Yep. When you lack toilets, this is very true. This is definitely
It's not so
very
much
true.
well, it's not that they're lacking toilets. It's just, it's their cultural practice to just shit in the streets.
Well, yeah, but I think they do also lack toilets as well. But which is, I don't know which came first. You know, the shitting in the street or the lack of toilets.
Was it like 10 years ago where they said, oh, Operation something, where they're going to give like 450 million people who still yet to have a toilet? Like the Indian government.
Oh dear, I don't know. I just think, also, of course, it was very revealing that in London you had the Pakistanis and Indians shouting and hollering at one another. Because the Pakistani and Indian immigrants in Britain are just as British as we are, don't you know? Except, of course, when Pakistan and India might have a war, or when Pakistan and India play cricket or do anything else, pretty much. And then they're not British at all, actually, as far as I can see.
Yeah. I'm not going to. I mean, some people are saying it's not going to be as bad as people think. They're just going to shout at one another. But to be fair, you got areas like Leicester or Birmingham where, for example, you got Smethwick where it's full of like Hindus and Sikhs. But then you get somewhere like Small Heath where it's all a lot more Pakistani. So perhaps you'd have to be because it's very segregated, even amongst like the Indians and Pakistanis, where you have, let's say, one area of Birmingham be completely Hindu or Sikh or both, and then it'd be like a fair distance away where you'll see the Pakistanis. So I don't know, but to be fair, I mean, you got plenty of avenues for both to confront one another. So,
Yeah.
so I won't be surprised if, people talk about how hot the summer was with the rioting. Well, we'll pretty much have a hot summer this year when, we just hope that Tommy Robinson or any of his crew don't get any of our side on the right involved in all this, because you know what he's going to do.
Well, I certainly am completely neutral in any war between India and Pakistan. I mean, as I say, I would definitely encourage Pakistanis and Indians in Britain to go home and be patriotic, but that's about as far as my views on it go. Other than that, I don't know who will win, and I don't care, really.
I mean, you get some people saying nothing will happen. I mean, so there's a treaty where I think the Indus Valley has to have its water supply coming from within India. The Indians have cancelled the treaty that ensures that, and of course Pakistan, in terms of the water supply, we're not self-sufficient on that one. They have to import their water from India. So the fact that the Indians are now suspending any treaties dealing with that kind of supply kind of tells you there is a great deal. Probably it's not going to be a nothing ever happens scenario with this one, by the looks of it. Something is going to happen because also all the Pakistani nationals in India have all been chucked out, and the police are searching for anyone still left behind.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? You get British politicians saying that we absolutely can't chuck people out of Britain. And, India seemed to manage to chuck all the Pakistanis out of India quite easily. Surprising, isn't it?
Yeah, it's I'm of a. Yeah, I was just going to say that there's that famous meme quote of Kissinger going, "I wish both sides can lose." That's basically all our position on it. I imagine is we just want both sides to lose.
Yeah, I mean, but I do. I mean, genuinely, I hope all those patriotic Indians and Pakistanis think, well, I'd better go home and support my real country,
I think
any of you.
Sorry, Hitman, you carry on.
I mean, I don't know if any of you watched the recent Old Glory Club stream, but Quinch Walker had a really funny meme that they shared where he said Pakistan could really save Twitter now by just cutting off India's connection to the internet, meaning you wouldn't have to deal with them on Twitter anymore.
That would be quite interesting, yes. That would indeed be quite interesting. I mean, you do
Oh,
get Indians masquerading as all sorts of people on X and what have you. So who knows?
yeah. Well, I think the funniest exchange I saw was an Indian and a Pakistani who both got Adolf Hitler as their profile pic, and they're just arguing about for example, the Indian goes, "I will massacre your entire family. Like, I'll do redacted upon you before I take a bath." And then the Pakistani fella apparently was like, "Oh, because of the Indians stinking so much, we'll probably kill off all our troops through chemical warfare."
Oh my God. Yeah, it's obviously a high level intellectual argument that they're having, but yeah, I think it's quite strange. I have to say, I really do. Yeah. Did you have a first topic for this week, Hitman?
Sorry, because there's quite a bit has happened. So I guess we could talk about. Okay, let's talk about the Homeland Party because from what I've heard, there's kind of an implosion going on with them because last week we talked about the fact that obviously Renaud Camus was like barred from entering the country to attend the conference, which actually took place today, and Camus sort of appeared remotely. But what's happened since then is Steve Laws has quit as the Southeast regional branch manager or whatever.
I heard that. Yeah,
and so apparently the reason he's quit after being with them for 6 months is because the leader Kenny, he was doing a good job, but over the past month he's made a lot of really bad decisions. And this links back to the other story we talked about last week, where they had this gay guy who's been to orgies became their branch leader for Belfast, and apparently Steve was like, "You've got to get rid of this guy. This is not on." And Kenny was like, "No, I'm going to defend him," and double down, and then hid replies on Twitter to their posts, and yeah. So basically,
to be fair, for anyone in the audience listening to this, this guy is not just a gay guy. He was someone who went to gay orgies and all this kind of stuff. Gay orgies, that's probably as far as I need to explain it to people. He wasn't simply a gay guy. He was a bit more than that. And certainly not the sort of person you would really want representing a supposedly patriotic party like Homeland, not the sort of person I'd choose anyway.
No, certainly not. No. So
yeah. Sorry, carry on, Hemant.
So obviously Steve Laws has quit. There was also a rumor going around that Zuma historian, who's also a member of the Homeland Party, was being kicked out because he was trying to get rid of Kenny as the leader. He's come and said, no, that's not what happens. And so a lot of bullshit and rumors has gone round. And so, and it's just depressing, really, that anytime something positive happens to the British right, some shit goes wrong. First it's reform, cucking, and Nigel kicking out Rupert Lowe, and now this shit with the Homeland Party. It's just constant implosions, isn't it?
Yeah, it just seems that the right never can get its act together. It's. I mean, Zuma historian, we follow each other on X, on Twitter. So yeah, I know. But what do you think about this stuff, Mitch?
Oh, this is why I've gone back to reform. I'm just canvassing for reform past couple of days.
Yeah, you might just as well, frankly, at the moment.
Yeah, it's just one of the things where I don't know what you make of the announcement of the Ministry of Deportations, because that's kind of stuff that Steve Laws was saying about banging the drum for, and now you got reform coming up with it. So I don't. So I didn't really see anyone on our side say, "Oh, perhaps this is reform, copying stuff of our homework." No, it's just everyone's just going skeptical about it, which I'm just thinking to myself, well, at the end of the day, they're banging the drum for it. It's something to hold them to account on, I suppose.
Yeah. I don't quite see why you've got to have a minister for deportations. The Home Secretary should be able to do that, to be honest, or someone from the Home Secretary's department. But yeah, as you say, Mitch, I mean, it's something else you can hold them to, I suppose.
Well, I'm just thinking. To sack off loads of civil service, you have to have stuff like the Great Repeal Bill. It's a very legally mess to do. So they're probably just creating a new ministry and must have it with all their friends to do all the deportations because the Home Office is just full of the blood.
Indeed. Yeah, no, that does make sense for sure. Hitman, what's your thinking on the Nigel Farage speech and announcements?
I'm a little bit skeptical about the separate office because it should be noted that the Green Party have previously called for breaking up the Home Office into two offices, one of security for dealing with, police and etc., and then the Department for Migration, purely for dealing with immigration. Obviously, the Greens being disgusting leftists, obviously want that to funnel more migrants into the country. So again, I'm a bit wary about a separate Department for Migration because of here is this being sold to us as one thing when really we're going to get something else. A bit like the whole Tony Blair digital ID thing.
Yeah. I mean, my thing on Homeland has always been that they're a long way off actually getting MPs because of their strategy. Now, I'm not responsible for Homeland strategy, and nor are any of us. But so far as I could work out, they weren't even particularly going to go for MPs at the next general election. And they certainly weren't going to be able to form a government even in Fantasyland. So the Homeland strategy, such as it was something aimed at 2034 or whatever it is. So that's a long way down the track. I'm not even certain I'll still be alive in 2034, quite frankly. But it's they seem to have badly messed up. I mean, Adaman posted something on X about it. I did, by the way, guys, send Adaman an invite, but sometimes he's working. I don't know if he's going to join us this evening. Adaman posted something about this because, as he said, it's left the southeast area without someone running it, which is what Steve Laws was doing. So it's pretty unfortunate, if you ask me, especially given that's the southeast was their biggest region, I think Adaman said.
No, certainly.
So it's not a good thing, and as you said, Hitman, it's just par for the course where the British right of centre parties are concerned. I mean, this is why we have half a dozen of them, and very few of them have any chance of actually getting MPs, except for Reform. And of course, what's been going on with Reform lately has, I think, worried quite a lot of people. But yeah.
No. Well, I think with Homeland, I think their goal was to try and capture things locally, and then move on from there. But considering the recent shenanigans, it all just feels like a bit of a false start, doesn't it?
It does to me. It really does to me. I don't know. And I mean, Belfast is not the sort of place, or Ulster rather, is not the sort of place I would put someone who went to gay orgies. Belfast tends to be fairly traditional, as far as I know. But yeah.
No.
I mean, I think you can over vet your candidates, which I think Reform have done, particularly when they've allowed horrible lefty groups like Hope Not Hate to do so. But on the other hand, you have to vet them a bit, so,
Yeah, I wonder
because we were talking about India and Pakistan, but did you guys see that there was a guy who was like a self-proclaimed like Bangladeshi nationalist has become like a councillor for Reform?
Yep, saw that. Yep, I did. And there's another bloke who wants reparations for slavery, who's also somehow or other involved with Reform. I don't know how. As a candidate.
Yeah, he's You've got his Neville Watson, I believe his name is. He's the branch head for Enfield
Uh-huh.
in Reform. It's I, I I don't. I mean, I saw like I saw Carl Benjamin. I saw some people when I saw complain about how like Reform have like a lot of ethnic minorities. They go, yeah, a lot of that's the boomerish kind of like that. But I have to see like so in the eyes of like a lot of the boomers in Reform, it's like, oh, we can't be critical of immigration too much unless we got permission slip from ethnic minorities to do so. But at the same time, a lot of it's also consequences of the Equality Act, where you're not allowed to you're not allowed to quote unquote discriminate against ethnic minorities in any way, shape, or form. So it's kind of
But
like
you can discriminate against white Anglo-Celtic British as much as you like, basically.
yeah, it's one of those things where because of the way the law is, it's so much stuff will be left wing, but I can cut Reform some slack in terms of you know in terms of sort of having to have loads of ethnic minorities in the party, but like when you got Bangladeshi nationalists and pro reparations, like West Indian types,
Yeah.
it's kind of you kind of muddies the waters too much to the point where you just go, okay, why are these people in the party? Why do they feel comfortable within Reform? Because Reform, of course, the whole point of them is they're meant to be. Yeah, I believe they're a bit too boomerish, like they're too like they're too. What would be the word? Like they're not fully cognizant of like, so should we say, racial realities. Like for example, yeah, you have a lot of blacks in this country, they just don't like us because of historical, uh, historical baggage to do with the empire, and a lot of people in
Which
Reform
is
just think, oh,
which
you're going to
is
assimilate.
it's weird though, Mitch, because those West Indian countries, for example, simply wouldn't exist but for Britain.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I'm wondering if like this India versus Pakistan, if it causes riots over in like areas like Leicester and Birmingham and London, I wonder if it's gonna. Because I remember last year I was talking to one guy who was a parliamentary candidate for Reform. I managed to turn him somewhat into an F now because I said, "Oh, Rishi Sunak isn't really English because of all the stuff like D-Day and whatnot." I wonder how
Yeah.
many people in Reform will turn their heads our way when they see Indians and Pakistanis rioting, and they're seeing like 1 minute these Indians and Pakistanis will say 1 minute, "Oh, we're British as you, British as you, mate," and then we'll see them riot over Kashmir or wherever.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, Mitch. Piggy Sue in the chat is saying that Reform may be a bit optics cucked, but that's preferable to not caring about optics at all, which seems to be the case for other right-wing parties. But I don't think there's much evidence for that, to be honest. You're not getting into office if the country thinks you're racist. You see, I disagree with that, and I have disagreed with it for a long time. I think a lot of the ordinary, average, real British voters, the native population of Britain, are really over this shit. They're really over this, and I think many of them have got no problems with mass deportations and that sort of thing. I keep seeing centre right people and centre liberal people saying, "Oh, British public won't vote for you if they think you're racist." I'm sorry, I just don't think that's true, and I would be interested to hear what Mitch and Hitman have to say about that.
Well, I got talking to I got talking to a Zoomer who's like couple of years old, a couple of years younger than me. And he was like saying, "Oh, I'm not racist, but I don't like Indian taxi drivers because and he's like, well, so like, guy's a young chap, and he's just like, and he's saying same opinions about your average Gen X football patriot would say about Indians. Basically, don't like him because they can't believe speak English properly, and they're not ask him elbow, and it's kind of like that's a lot of it's just exasperation. So yeah, if you were to say we're just going to deport, but on the other hand, you have Farage who's cooking a lot on Ukraine compared to what he said last year, and it looks like on one hand he's serious about wanting to be prime minister. So there's an element of he's having to he's able to walk back on a lot of his positions, like Ukraine, because people are a lot more left wing, and it's like AI shows where he put a post up saying about why the right doesn't have much success, and it's like, well, too many people in this country just default to liberalism. That's the main problem. Like too many people in the average public.
I think,
default to liberalism.
Mitch, I think Ukraine is slightly different in that I think the British people have been subjected to so much mainstream media propaganda about Ukraine and Russia that is a position many people have, but it's a position that people have who don't go any further than the biased brainwashing corporation or the Daily Mail. You know,
Okay,
it's those guys.
Well, it's like you are facts. So, for example, if I was over like a village in rural Staffordshire, right? The people there, they don't live near any of the diversity, so they're just a lot more naive around it. Like, if you were to ask them, like, if I were to just say to one of them, "Oh yeah, why don't we do mass deportations?" And it's like, well, but they just don't really think about it because they don't live anywhere near it. And of course, the problem. This is one thing where part of our culture, which I can really detest at times, for just extreme politeness, we would have to be nice. So mass deportations wouldn't be nice. We have to be courteous. And it's like, well, that's one problem you've got with a lot of British people. Like, there's that sort of politeness. You know, it's like it's not just over; it's also in Sweden and in Japan, where people don't like being seen as hostile for no reason, or they don't like being seen as nasty. They don't like to be seen as this, that, and the other. Especially when they don't live near any of the diversity, so they've got the luxury of having that kind of ability. It's not the average lived in voter in the Southern Shires. Like, they don't live near any of the diversity. You know, the closest to them are gypsies who are just a menace, and no one has a problem being anti-gypsy, I suppose. Who the hell cares about nice? Most British people, unfortunately, that's just the way our culture is. We have to be nice. We have to be polite. We can't appear nasty or hostile. You know.
See, that's a new thing, though, Mitch. It really is. Politeness is one thing. Being nice is another. You know, and I think that's a relatively new thing with Britain.
Nah, that's been around for longer than I've been alive. But I know.
No. But Mitch, with due respect, you're a young chap in your 20s, so yeah, all right. But I'm saying the politeness has always been a British thing for sure. But there's a difference between politeness and being nice in air quotes. Do you see what I'm getting at? And I'm not saying of course you're right. If you're in your 20s, yes, it's been around all your life. But it's not a traditional British thing to be nice. Hitman, you're a bit of a historian. What would you say to that?
Well, no, I would agree. You know, British and people are known for being polite and civil. But, you know, when we say nice, well, I guess what we're meaning is, you know, weak or cucks, I think is what we're talking about here.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. Thank you.
You know, so you're polite and civil up until you've got someone being an arse or being an oaf or being a wanker, and then you know, stiff upper lip and all that.
Yeah, and then you bomb the shit out of them, or you launch a bayonet charge against them, or whatever the fuck you got to do. You know, that was more the traditional British way of doing things. Polite, while you can be polite, but you know, there comes a situation where politeness doesn't cut it, and then you've got to be tough. You know, and the idea that Britain created the largest empire the world has ever seen by being nice is pretty fucking ridiculous, to be honest with you. You know,
Right. The thing with the Victorians was about. I mean, you know, you can find like Victorian racial scientists, like what's his name? The name will come to me, but the guy who created social Darwinism, I don't remember his name in a minute. You know, even though I don't know, I suppose like some people say, oh well, some people on the right will say, oh, we were liberal individualists back then, like, but whereas nowadays it's like, well, people have been bombarded for bloody years that we're all individuals. Oh, you can't judge people by their racial group. Because, you know, you can't think of people as collectives. You can't think of people. You have to think of people as blank slates, and that when you've been bombarded by propaganda longer than not been alive, I just think, this is what, and this has been my way since the boomers onward. I just think there's too many British people who they're too courteous, even to people who just everyone despise them, especially people who don't live anywhere near the diversity.
I would just hang on a minute, Mitch. I would just say to Davey in the chat that Mitch is not confusing civility with respect. He's saying the public are. I don't think he does at all. Sorry, Mitch, you carry on.
Yeah, because it's like, let's say for argument's sake, right, someone goes into your house and may spit on you and may wish you dead and may say, oh, you shouldn't have children, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that person will consider themselves lucky you don't go after them with a meat cleaver. But I don't think most British people would be willing to do it, even when it's like, you get certain things, like small things. Let's say that Irish Republican, what they're called, what's it called, Kickstart or something. I can't remember what it was called, but basically, a bunch of Irish Republicans. I think that like in their 30s, and they still make songs of it, but you manufacture. And the thing about them was they won a court case against the government because they get funded by the taxpayer.
Is this the same band, Mitch, that started doing pro-Palestinian stuff?
Yeah, I believe so. They're basically they're mainly the ones who sing about up the raw and death to Tory politicians.
Yeah, that was these guys. Oh, that's the same guys. They do all this propaganda for the provisional IRA, and it's fine to kill British soldiers and all the rest of it. And the British government did nothing about these people for years. But all of a sudden, they do something pro-Palestinian and an anti-Israel, of course. And then the British government decides they're going to do them. Kind of tells you where the British government's priorities are, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's one of the things where that angers a lot of people, but I just think that there's also a sense of I just think people were too comfortable still. Like, people just live too comfortably to really kick up a fuss. Perhaps I'll vote in reform the way things are going because I think things are going to get bad to worse. You imagine, for example, there's a million of my generation who can't get work because the economy is half over it. And you said, thinking,
even if you can get work, you still can't afford to buy a house. So
Oh the government is literally outbidding you with your own tax, with your own money, so they can put migrants in there. But it's all right because they get to signal that they're getting rid of the migrant hotels. It's kind of like it's kind of what Tony Blair used to do back in the noughties, where he goes, "Oh well, I've reduced the waiting list," and he basically always doing some shuffling around with the nurses or whatever.
Yeah, no, I totally get you. I mean, if I was a young bloke these days, I would be in some despair, but I would also totally not be voting for the Lib Lab Con Unipie. I don't understand any bloke under about 40 who would even think about voting for the Lib Lab Con Unipie. I don't understand that at all because your wages are never going to increase under the Unipie, and house prices are never going to come down under the Unipie. And the only way house prices will ever come down in the UK is if you stop mass immigration and you have some mass deportations. I'm sorry, you just got to do that. And the policies of the Uni Party in terms of net zero, and all this climate change bullshit, which I want to talk about in a bit, that's just going to make it worse because it's making British energy costs ever higher, which of course is completely against creating new jobs.
Yeah, that's one of the main problems you've got. I mean, so you're just going to have a generation of young men like myself who are just, can't get a house. We can get a PC for argument's sake, but we can't get a house. We're going to find it hard to get jobs because the economy is also. I mean, but it's like you've got a whole you basically got a broken job market because you got stuff like energy bills for businesses being too high. Plus, you got the government taxing employees a lot more. It's basically just the worst of all worlds. And then you've got
plus endless numbers of immigrants who will work for peanuts. So,
yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like the government is just willfully building its own funeral pyre because you're just creating a class of people who you've screwed over so much that they've got no reason to buy into the system.
Yep, totally agree, mate. Hitman, what's your thoughts on this stuff that we're talking about?
Well, you're right, as in things are pretty dire, and most young men are not going to support the main parties. But the point is, there's not really going to be any major change until the next election. Though what I will say is, next Thursday we have the local elections, so I mean, there won't matter that much, other than the fact is that I think there'll be a useful barometer, because I expect the Tories are probably going to get hammered and lose a load of seats. I think Labour will too, and be interesting to see how many seats Reform win, because if they underperform, it will obviously prove the fact that their cucking is not really helping them. Whereas if they do well anyway, then obviously sounds like maybe they are doing the right thing, even though I don't agree with it. But of course, on the same day, you've got the by-election in Runcorn and Helmsby, my Gamesbury seat. So it'd be interesting to see if they pick that up as well.
I think the candidate in Runcorn for Reform is interesting. Like she's been a member of like 2 or 3 parties before she joined Reform, and I think she started off as a socialist. I've heard that she backed transvestite story hour, and she went to refugees welcome events and what have you. I don't know how true that is, but I've certainly heard that about her. So how is she going to be representative? Mitch, do you know more of the facts about her, maybe?
From what I've heard, basically her role was basically she was up at 10 mayor or something, and apparently that's a purely ceremonial position. So she has no power apparently. So I don't know how I don't know. I'm very much a functionalist in terms of how I think government should work. So I don't understand why ceremonial positions work. I don't know why ceremonial positions even exist. I think So
well, it's a traditional British thing to have like a Lord Mayor and this kind of stuff,
yeah,
but I kind of get that. I kind of get that.
I just never understood why. Because because normally, when you think of someone mayor, well, if you look at the Latin word mayor, it literally means important. Like it would literally translate as about important person. Like the whole point is they're meant to be powerful. They're meant to be someone who, if you were to complain about something to them, they can get something done. But if it's purely ceremonial, where they just always cut ribbons, it's like there's no. So for example, I don't love the monarchy at the moment because it's just like, well, they're purely ceremonial. They don't really do anything.
I'd have to agree with you on that one, Mitch. I am a monarchist in theory, at least, and I was an actual monarchist when the late Queen was still around. Partly because when I was an 18-year-old, I swore allegiance to her when I joined the army. I get that there were many criticisms you can legitimately make about Queen Elizabeth II, many. But I just have no time for Charles III at all. I'm sorry, I just don't. No time for his politics or anything else that he does. I just don't like the guy. As
for that Sarah woman apparently being, to be fair, 10 years ago, for example, I was like a Stalinist. I was like a Stalin type communist, whereas now I'm the complete opposite. So,
to be fair, 10 years ago, Mitch, you would have been, I don't know, 13 or something, yeah. So,
I turned 24 recently, so yeah, pretty much.
I mean, yeah, but I think. I agree with Davey. I'm a monarchist, but I'm not a monarchist for this particular monarch. I'm just not. But with this, there's a tangential subject to that we may come around to in a little while. Yeah, so Hitman, you started us on this path that we've wandered along about the ills of modern Britain. I see someone in the chat saying that the Tories will do well. I don't think they will, to be honest. And I think if they do, that's a very bad sign for reform. If the Conservatives do well in these upcoming local elections, that's not good for reform at all. I don't know what you guys think. I know that Mitch is a bit pro-reform, Hitman's a bit anti-reform, and I'm probably somewhere in between the both of you. So, Hitman, what's your thinking on what we've been talking about for the moment, and also the upcoming local elections?
Well, again, ultimately, I think the main consequence is these are a barometer for how well the parties are doing. So if Reform win a load of seats, then okay. Then despite all the cucking, what Farage is doing is actually working in terms of making Reform electable. So making them electable is not the same as actually delivering, solutions to fix the country. But I'd agree with you that if the Tories do well, then yeah, that is not a good sign because we want the Tory party to be dead. We don't want them to revive.
No, not at all.
Okay, in terms of my prediction, I think both the Tories and Labour will lose seats, whereas I think Reform and the Lib Dems will gain seats. It's only a question of how much, what's the magnitude? Will it be a big win for both of them, or will it only be a minor win?
Yeah, no, I think if Reform do really well, then as you say, to some degree, that's going to vindicate Farage. If they do reasonably well, then Farage maybe isn't doing quite the right thing. I don't see Labour doing very well because the government's been a total disaster. And I still don't think people have even begun to forgive the Conservatives for the last 14 years of lies, basically. You can fool the public a lot and for a long time. But I think the last 14 years have really undermined the so-called Conservative Party. I think they've really undermined them. These days, the only people I see supporting the Conservatives are very elderly boomers for the most part.
And
their membership shows that fairly clearly, I think, these days. They're very limited membership these days. Sorry, carry on, Himman.
Yes, I'm going to say this next bit a bit carefully, but I mentioned cringe walk earlier. Well, another take a cringe walker that he's pointed out regarding America is, but it's predicted that between now and the next American election, that 10 million boomers will die due to old age or illness or the ravages of time. And obviously, the boomers favoured the Democrats, so that's one thing that's in favour of Trump and his sort of coalition. Whereas I'm actually thinking it's the same here, really, if you think about it. That the ravages of time, there's going to be less boomers who are going to be voting at the next election, and that certainly will probably really help kill the Tories off because that's all left who are voting for them.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you what I think, guys, in regard to this stuff, is you will remember we did a stream on this channel about Enoch Powell a few weeks ago, and I'm old enough. Just about to remember some of this stuff. Like my father was a huge Enoch Powell supporter, and my father was born in between the wars. He was born in 1933, and like when I was a teenager, most of the elderly blokes I knew, and bear in mind the elderly men I knew when I was a teenager, included a lot of First World War veterans who'd fought on the Somme and at Passchendaele and what have you. A lot of those guys were still around when I was a teenager. And the majority of them were, like the older people, were Second World War veterans or women who'd been around during the war. And those guys were pretty right wing in terms of stuff like immigration and what have you. They were, in fact, some of them were very right wing. And you know, at that time, even all the labor unions, etc., were very supportive of Enoch Powell. So I get it. You know, when young people talk about boomers these days, they're talking about people who are mostly a little bit older than I am, right? And I'm 60. So they're mostly talking about people 65 and up. And you see, my difficulty with that is that most of the guys of my age that I know have known in the past well enough to know their politics and all this kind of stuff. They were mostly ex-military guys, and those guys, for the most part, are not very lefty, or they never used to be anyway. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, go for it, Emma.
Well, if they're ex-military, then that probably explains it. Well, not all boomers are ex-military, so your friends are probably an exception.
Yeah, most of them are not ex-military, of course. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so ultimately, you've got to bear in mind that the oldest boomers were born in 1946. So Donald Trump is a very old boomer. And they're going to be 79 this year. That's just over the average life expectancy for a male in Britain or America. So yeah, several of them are going to not be here by the next election, and any parties that rely on them for votes are probably going to die unless they make some dramatic comeback.
Yeah, and the Conservatives absolutely rely on these people. I think the Conservatives have relatively few members who are under 60, basically.
No, because remember with the leadership election they had, because at the previous one they had with Truss, I think they had like 130,000 members and like 110,000 members voted. Well, in the one we had in November, it was only something like 90,000 members and only 70,000 of them voted. It's like, Christ, it's like the amount of attrition. It is literally.
Yeah. There's a lot of people dropping out of the Conservative Party for sure. And as you guys were saying, a lot of these people are going to die over even the next 4 years. A lot of them are going to die,
Exactly.
Yeah, it's, I'm seeing someone in chat saying, "Oh, the Tories are seen as a default right-wing alternative." I mean, the thing about Farage is he's got name recognition now. That's not now people buff it up in ways that it's a bit of like because something like 96% of the population know who he is, and of those who know of him, around 26% like him. The rest of them loathe or just dislike him. So he's not the most popular. So he might be the most well known, but he's not as. But he's also one of the guys where more people loathe him and like him, even though
Mitch, I can't think that Nigel Farage is less popular than either two-tier Keir Starmer or the Nigerian woman Badenoch, who's supposedly leading the so-called Conservatives. I mean, I can't believe either of those two are popular either, to be honest with you.
No, I mean, Farage is the most popular, but I think it's something like, they'll go, "Oh, which of these candidates would you want to be your next prime minister?" And it's like, well, Farage gets something like 24, 25%, and second place we've got Starmer at 18%. Kemi Badenoch on like 16 or 17, and then the others are just like, well, barely noticeable. Like the Green Party woman, whose name I can't remember. All I remember was
pretty much.
It's like I can't remember what Morgoth called it. He called like a midget goblin or something. I can't remember what he said. He said during the general election, and that's basically just my image of that Green Party woman. It's just like, well, she's just midget goblin who just goblin with a big mouth.
Laurie is suggesting I underestimate the centre-right's desire to have a minority woman to cheer on. I presume this is the same Laurie from my Discord, but I'm not sure. But I'm the centre-right of like the political leadership. I would agree with you, but I'm not sure how true that is of the mass of the public, because I don't think it is, to be honest.
In terms of a lot of the boomer people who are still voting Tory, that's actually still true. Like, a lot of them just have like a massive fetish for.
If they're
Like,
still voting Tory, yeah, fair enough. I get you. Yeah.
yeah. We're talking about the kind of people who voted Kemi Badenoch, put it that way. Like, they love someone like Kemi Badenoch because like, I was someone who spoke about talking points about the woke, but she's a black woman, so they can't get called racist for it.
Oh yeah, with Candace Owens and all that stuff. Yeah, no, I totally do see that, and I find it lamentable, shall we say, that people still need to do that. You know, these people who come out with, oh, the left are the real racists and all that kind of shit. I'm sorry, I've just got no time for that anymore. I have no time for that shit anymore. If someone calls me a racist, I laugh and say, so, really. It's okay to be a racist if you're the British Foreign Secretary, for God's sake, and your name is David Lammy. Then you can be a racist, but you can't be if you're a natural, real Anglo-Celtic white British person. Then you're not allowed to be. But every other group is allowed to be racist. You know.
Exactly.
It's just the hypocrisy of this stuff. People have just got to start seeing the hypocrisy of this. It's okay for every other group to have a group identity, except for the native British.
People see the hypocrisy. They just don't go as far as us about how to resolve it, because we resolve it by going, okay, let's just get rid of the Indians and Pakistanis of it, for example, and just like send them back to their homeland. Whereas too many people, like, for example, you have the whole meme about Nick, 30 years old, who has to subsidise like boomers and immigrants and whatnot. Well, that 30-year-old bloke still believes in some of the tenets of the woke. Like, he still believes in diversity being somewhat a good thing for society. Not as much as like what David Lammy will say, but to some degree he will believe in certain tenets of a system. And yeah, it's one of those things where you are factor that with Farage, well, yeah, there are problems with Farage. Like, he does jump out in and out, like according to what he feels fits him off. And the right hasn't really had much of a presence the past, since the days of the BNP. I suppose you've got UKIP, but I mean, UKIP had its issues. Like, you have Gawain Taylor, who was found to be working with Hop Not Hate back in 2010. So it's kind of one of the things where you are a factor that you having to stop at square one with a lot of people on the average public, because the right hasn't been as present as people might be tempted to think.
I think, to be honest, the people, this is part of the problem. I think is that the people who are very black-pilled about mass immigration and so on are the people who live next to it. And although that is increasing all over the country, and deliberately so, because the government's doing that on purpose, but although that is increasing, as people have said in the chat, and as you said earlier, Mitch, a lot of people are still not seeing that every day. And the people who are seeing it every day tend to be the poorer working class, white native British people. And of course, the ones who the two-tier care will label as evil gammons and all the rest of it, But those guys have been able to see this stuff for quite a long time now, and that you can't live a decent life in a society where this happens, because you are going to have ever-increasing criminality, ever-increasing so-called grooming gangs targeting little white schoolgirls and all this sort of thing. You know, I think that's part of the problem. Anyway, Hitman, you started us on this track. Did you have any final thoughts on it before I asked Mitch if he had a first subject for this evening?
Well, no, other than, well, you know what they say, things can only get better.
Well, yeah, that's almost literally true at the moment, but yeah, fair enough. Before I ask Mitch what his first subject is, I'd just like to say, guys, please hit the like button. It really does help the channel if you hit that thumbs up button. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And you can support the channel, and you can also ask Super Chat questions via Entropy, which is pinned at the top of the chat. And just to let people know, we do actually have a Super Chat from Garen. So I have seen it, and I will read it out later on. There's not a question attached to it, so I won't do it now, but I will later on. So if you want to ask a Super Chat question or support the channel, use the Entropy link at the top of the chat. All right, Mitch, did you have a first subject you wanted to bring up this evening?
Yeah, I think I've already brought up on mine. I don't know if anyone has taken the time to even look at what someone like Critical Joke has been saying of Last of Us Season 2. What I'm finding funny about it is the fact that the actress who got to play Abby, who's meant to be the antagonist, looks more like the main character than the actress who got to play the main character to begin with. And it's just, it's like apparently season 1 had like, on average like 1 million viewers per episode. Now it's got 600,000. And the thing about, because it's based upon the second Last of Us game, and the second Last of Us game was so poorly written in terms of how they had like the antagonist. You know, for example, you got this one woman by the name of Abby, who's meant to be the antagonist, but you also meant to feel for her, but they poorly wrote her. Another thing was, basically, she's built up like, yeah, you imagine what the build you had in the army back in your prime. Just imagine that build, but on a woman. It just looks pretty ridiculous. Seeing this like 5'8" woman who somehow is able to lift up like really heavy objects and so on. Like it's just that's another thing that ruined the game. Like I never played it. I only played the first one. But like the second game, yeah, it was just a lot of it was just like contrary to the instincts of just basic female biology, I suppose. Considering like, you know, there's no way a woman can get that built up. Not even someone like Ronda Rousey or whatever could ever get that built up.
No, I do. Look, I've never played this game. I don't know anything about it. I've never watched this TV show. I don't know anything about it, although I've heard a couple of people who I do follow talk about it vaguely. But this whole girl boss thing is just fucking ridiculous, frankly. It just is. You know, 5'5" women cannot beat up 6 foot blokes. They cannot. It's not possible for them to do it.
So I mean, well, okay. I'll rephrase. I'll say naturally. I say women can't give a built naturally. I mean, steroids. Yeah, I've never used steroids, so I don't know anything about them. But like, perhaps
but
a woman
even those things, Mitch. Listen, again, I'm not an expert, but even those things, to the best of my knowledge, yeah, they bulk you up, but they won't give you fitness and stamina. You know, they won't.
Yeah, because it's like you got a factor. So she lives in a post-apocalyptic world where basically you got to deal with the fungus that turns people into zombies. She's not going. And yeah, you can imagine. Yeah, she could probably. I can imagine women could get. Well, it's like I don't know. A 5'8" woman is not going to get built up as much as, for example, she's in a fight against a guy who's like, I don't know, 6 foot, and she manages to somehow win because the guy gets slightly stabbed by some second woman who it was poorly written anyway, that particular scene where she was able to get the better of this guy just because he was temporarily distracted by getting stabbed by a little Asian bird.
Yeah, that's distracting to game. Getting stabbed is distracting. I've been stabbed. I know what that means, but yeah. Yeah,
Like,
Mitch, even if you can build up your muscle and what have you, even if you can do that, women have much lighter and thinner bones than blokes, right?
yeah,
So
so
even in their hands, so even a woman trying to use her fists or what have you, or a foot, for example, women have lighter and thinner bones that break more easily. A woman who punches a guy in the face is quite liable to break bones in her hand, you know,
yeah, and then
because her bones are thin and weak, basically.
yeah, it's like, for example, I saw some. I think she was like a rad femme on Twitter. She was bemoaning, like, so apparently she claims that she's like 6 foot, but a guy who is 5'5" is able to give her better of her in a fight, even though he's smaller
Yeah.
than her in terms of height.
Yes, because
But
he's got
that's
bigger
just the way.
muscle mass, heavier bones. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and basically she was using it to say, oh, this is why women have to fear men, and it's like, well, okay, that's like so by this argument, I have to fear every time I were to come across someone of your height, just because someone of your height would be stronger than me, even if. Blah, it's just it's a stupid argument.
But it's not even as simple as that, Mitch. You know but if you look at people who are really good at combat, all right. So it doesn't matter if you look at professional military guys like the SAS and the SBS in Britain, for example. You know, like elite special forces guys, or you look at really good or what's it called, mixed martial art guys. Yeah, they're not always the biggest blokes by any means in terms of height and what have you. You know, they're not, because
Yeah,
there's relative strength and all that kind of stuff. But that stuff doesn't translate between the sexes. You know, within men, yeah, absolutely. Like you can get a really good middleweight boxer who can knock out heavyweight. You can, right? You absolutely can. It's happened. But you can't transfer that between the sexes. Doesn't work that way, because women, no matter how big or small they are, have smaller and lighter bones and smaller and less strong muscles. And they can't change that no matter what they do. I'm sorry.
yeah,
I hopefully that didn't confuse people, but that's the fact of it.
yeah. It's just, but yeah, the other thing was so the second game just had a lot of, for example, you got the main character now. She's put down as a lesbian because reasons, even though I mean,
Uh-huh.
then you've got then you've got a transgender Asian bird in it because why not? Yeah, it was just every leftist cultural dogma you can imagine. Last of Us Part Two conformed to, because the thing was, the first Last of Us game was written by an English literature grad woman in her 50s, and basically she got turfed out by Neil Druckmann because she refused to say she hates men, because after all, men gave her a career. Like, it was because of men that she was able to write a damn good script for a video game. That's probably one of the best-selling ones of all time. So she got
Yeah.
turfed out. Neil Druckmann, who's a complete leftist hack, comes in, rewrites it all, and it's just basically, transgenderism, check. Or 5'8" woman who's built up like a 6'5" bodybuilder, check. Every leftist cultural dogma you can think of, just inserted. And so Last of Us Part 2 is just, plenty of people have plenty of gripes with it. And the guys like Neil Druckmann just go on and go, oh, this is proven misogyny, this is sexism, blah, blah, blah. Or this is the alt-right. And, like, kind of that kind of
But
argument.
Mitch, have you ever seen the hypocrisy, though, of women saying these things that you're talking about here? But at the same time, right, you get TERFs, and don't get me wrong, I think they're right about this, but you get TERFs saying, but transgender men, right, i.e. mentally ill men, should not be allowed to compete in female sports. Now, I totally agree with them on that. I don't want to see mentally ill men competing in female sports, but you can't have it both ways. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, so for example, right, so I'm going to do a course recently with a transgender person calling herself Alexander. Now, how I don't want to say no good, but put it this way, she's so skinny. I think like my pinky has more meat on it than her entire body, and and I never understood like female to male transitions for argument's sake. Never understood it because like it's never convincing, and it's just one of those things where you get people doing that, and it's easy to tell. I mean, you can just look at how skinny they are, how much, and like the faces still look feminine and whatnot. It's just you get stuff like that, and it's you also get stuff like the term like that Supreme Court ruling. Now, someone mentioned it earlier. Yeah, it's basically just you have one section released, or either feminists, they're realizing, oh crap, some of our privileges might be gotten rid of in the name of transgenderism. So now they're turning on the transgenderism. So you got like two sections of the elite chewing away at one another. So
yeah, no, look, I think you're right. Hitman, any thoughts on this stuff?
Well, it's just more woke rubbish, isn't it? I mean, I've never played The Last of Us, but all I can say is that I don't know if you guys saw, but American Krogan did do like an overview of the Last of Us series, because he also reviewed the original game and the second one, and it's just incredible because the first game, from what he was saying, is actually quite good, but they decided, oh well, we can't have a strong male character, so we've got to completely undercut him in the second game and undercut him in the TV show. So it's just incredible how destructive culture can be, especially when it has a quote unquote a problematic narrative.
All I would say about this before moving on to Aaron Hook, who I'm glad to say has joined us, all I would say about this before I move on to Aaron is that to me, you get people at the moment particularly talking about toxic masculinity and some of these male influences and what have you. But toxic femininity has been a thing in the West for the last 50 years, getting ever worse. And it's just, it's now come to the stage that it's just anti-male, basically. I would hate to have a little boy now going to a state school because they want to turn them into girls, basically.
I would say toxic femininity. I mean, you can see, like, for example, like, because I talked to him just about watching Rome. You get certain female characters from that. I mean, there are certain parts of femininity which, are just toxic, but it's just part of femininity. Like, for example, you might have one character in Rome who, because Julius Caesar broke up with her, she turns massively vengeful and massively scheming and deceitful and so on. Mm-hmm. I mean, how many women in history have been like that? Because they were spurned love her, they all just turn into a massive.
Always fear the wrath of a woman scorned, mate. Always. It's true. It's true.
Yeah, and then you get one thing about mine. So, for example, you have a woman called Elizabeth Bathory of Hungary. So she was a Hungarian noblewoman who feared aging. So it was rumored that she bathed in the blood of virgins in order to keep her skin looking young.
Oh, Bathory, yeah, Bathory, yeah.
Yeah, basically that's just that's kind of like a metaphor for what my generation's women can be like. They're just terrified of aging, so they just go for like stuff. They go for like Botox at the age of 20, or they'll have lip fillers and stuff, and it just always looks tacky. A lot.
We may well come back to that in a minute, Mitch. Can I just welcome Aaron Hook? How are you going, Aaron?
I'm all right. Thank you for having me on.
No, mate, you're always most welcome on my streams. Have you got anything to add about this, The Last of Us TV show and the game, etc., that we're talking about? And then I'll ask you if you have a subject you'd like to bring up.
Yeah, my knowledge of it is purely sort of secondhand. I've heard that the first game is good, the second game is full of bollocks, and the TV adaptation is like the second game. That's pretty much all I know. I haven't even bothered to watch it.
Fair enough. Did you have a first subject you wanted to bring up this evening, Aaron?
I'm not sure if you brought this up because I was on a live stream myself, but India-Pakistan, if that's not brought up before.
Yeah, we did talk about it a bit at the beginning. I mean, my view is that they should all go home and be patriots and go fight.
Yeah.
But you'll understand that I'm somewhat jaded about this stuff, and I just thought it was interesting that in London you've got Pakistanis and Indians, shouting and hollering at each other and threatening violence. And why do they need to be in Britain? I don't get it,
Yeah.
to be honest. It's not our issue.
No. In fact, there's a point was made by Aris Racinos that the Rush one heard. He said the point about decolonisation is that we have nothing to do with these countries anymore. They are not our responsibility. Therefore,
Well, I mean, one of the things I pointed out, Aaron, on X is that even though India and Pakistan both have nuclear weapons and both of them are armed to the teeth, both countries still take millions and millions of pounds in British taxpayers' aid, which I just don't know why we give it to them. If they can afford nuclear weapons, they don't need our taxpayers' money,
I mean, if India can not only afford nuclear weapons, they can afford an attempted space program, so they definitely don't need that money from us.
100%, mate. That's my view entirely.
Yeah.
But I think the British government should actually be willing to pay the airfares of Indians and Pakistanis in Britain to go home, so they can go fight if they want to. I think, but then they shouldn't be allowed to come back, of course, but they should be allowed to leave. It's like,
And it's going to be interesting exactly where things flare up if in this country if they do end up fighting a war. Because obviously Leicester is going to be a hotspot, but areas in Birmingham like Smallheath is going to kick off, and where I am close to, in fact, we're near to me and Mitch Dudley. So it'll be interesting if anything happens there.
Yeah, Mitch was Aaron. Mitch was talking earlier about some of the areas where this may well flare up, and it's a bit like the Palestinian and Israeli thing. This is happening in Britain because of mass immigration. If we didn't have mass immigration, these assorted third world problems would not be Britain's.
Yeah.
There's no reason for Britain to have riots between Indians and Pakistanis because they should be in India and Pakistan and not in Britain. And I would say the same thing about Palestinians and Israelis, frankly.
Yeah.
Like I'm neutral in all these wars. I don't care. So long as our blokes don't get involved in it, I don't give a shit. They can murder each other as much as they like, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, obviously, I don't support violence, especially against women and kids. I don't. But, if they want to fight, let them go and fight. It's not my problem. It's not British people's problem.
Yeah, it's also going to be interesting what the effects on the Labour Party will be, given they will obviously try, given their the large Muslim vote, they're obviously going to try and play it both ways by being neutral, whilst obviously trying to back Pakistanis. But
I think they've already started, Aaron. I think the Labour Party, the Labour government have already started kind of backing Pakistan, which is crazy because if it really comes to a war, they ain't going to win. But I mean, whatever.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that if they try and do the two things at once, you may get more independence. So you obviously haven't got the Gaza independence at the moment. You might get Pakistani independence, i.e. they're standing because of the government's attitude towards Pakistan as opposed to just being Muslims in general.
Well, I'm going to ask Hitman about this because Hitman is a bit of an Arabist. And whilst Pakistan is not an Arab country, it's kind of semi-related. So, Hitman, what's your thoughts on that one?
Well, with regards to Pakistan being semi-related, I would say, okay, they're Muslim, but I would say Pakistan is more Persianized than Arabized because the national language, Urdu, is a fusion language between Persian and Hindi. So, because of its geographic position, it's obviously natural that there's going to be some Persianate influences. many sort of Persianate empires have controlled Pakistan or parts of it. You've got the they've got the Ghaznavids, the Ghurids, obviously the Mughals and the Safavids. So so for that reason, there is a significant Persian influence. Though I think that's largely on the, I think we could say the elite of the country, and less so on the mass of the people.
Yeah, perfect sense to me. Mitch, anything you want to say about
Oh, I don't really have much to say about it. Well, it hasn't already been said regarding India versus Pakistan. Well, I just wish both sides could lose, and that we just get more.
that? Yeah, that's pretty much my position, to be honest. But yeah.
Yeah, other than that, I just want both. I just want the citizens of both countries, like out here, like in terms of like Indians and Pakistanis, are just a nuisance over here. I just wish we could get rid of them. Like we could
100%.
just get rid of them.
Yep, totally agree. Totally agree. I put up something from Sonny Jim about Don the Pleb. Now, Don the Pleb is my friend. I like him. He's a good bloke. And Academic Agent got totally the wrong end of the stick of what happened in Don the Pleb's Discord. And someone misinformed him. It had nothing to do with Mrs. AA. Nothing whatsoever. I know this. I've looked into it. And it was just a mistake. But yeah, Sonny Jim is also correct that Don the Pleb was arrested by the FBI for over the January 6th stuff for no good reason, because Don the Pleb didn't do anything illegal on January the 6th that I saw, and I watched his stream that he did. But yeah, he hasn't himself been pardoned, but because all the January 6th protesters have been pardoned, that means that the FBI pretty much have had to drop their case with Don, so far as I understand it anyway. So yeah, but Don's a good bloke, and any rumors you might have heard if you were involved in AA when he still used to do unpopular opinions and all that stuff, that was he was just misinformed by somebody, basically.
My understanding was that AA's problem with Don is that Don basically refuted a lot of arguments AA said and claimed that AA stole ideas from him, because he did like a whole stream reacting to it.
Yeah, but where it started here, man, was that Don used to have a Discord, and there was a woman on Don's Discord who was called Mrs. AA, but it was it was the wife of somebody on his Discord. It wasn't Academic Agent's wife, right? And someone made a joke on there about this woman who was not Mrs. Academic Agent, but another Mrs. AA. And somebody on that Discord, whose name is something like Green, whatever it is, who's involved with the Shieldings group.
You mean Jay? You mean Jay Green River?
Yes, that person. He misinformed. Maybe he made a mistake himself, being generous. He might have made a mistake himself, but he told AA that someone on Don the Pleb's Discord was having a go at his wife, Mrs. AA, and it wasn't. It was a completely different woman who was just called Mrs. AA because that was her initials. And it had nothing to do with Academic Agent whatsoever. And Green River made a mistake, basically. And so AA then went overboard and slagged off Don the Pleb, which was completely ridiculous and had no basis in fact whatsoever.
I mean, all I have to say is that, I mean, why would Mrs. AA be in Don the Pleb's Discord server? She's got nothing to do with what we do online, so it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, exactly right. And also, the woman in Don the Pleb's Discord, they were joking. It wasn't even serious. It was just someone making a joke about someone who was in the Discord. And this Green River character totally took it out of context and then ran off to AA like some little schoolgirl, and that's what caused it all.
Right. I mean, Nova Sheffield is saying D. What, is Mr. D involved in this as well or something?
No, I don't think he was, Lofa Sheffield. As far as I know, I don't think D was really involved in that, to be honest. I don't. I'm fine with Mr. D. I don't have a big issue with him, and I don't think he was really involved in that at all, as far as I know.
No, I mean, I didn't think he would be. He doesn't seem like his sort of thing. So
no, it was too petty for him to get involved in, I think, to be honest. But whatever. But I made a stream at the time, and I did one on my own, and then I did another stream with Don the Pleb. So anyone who wants to go and look into the history of this stuff can go look on my channel back stuff. I got hundreds of streams and videos on my channel, but you can go into the back of it if you want to. But it was, thank you, Lofa Sheffield. Lofa Sheffield was saying, no, he wasn't talking about Mr. D in regard to that. It was something else. So, because I don't think Mr. D was involved in that at all, actually. I think it was just this Green River character. Who I'm not desperately fond of, but whatever. Don't really know him. Don't speak to him, to be honest. But Don's a pretty good bloke. I mean, Don's also a married man. He's ex-US Marine Corps combat veteran, and he's married himself. He doesn't slag off people's wives. That's not his style at all, and he never has, as far as I know.
I mean, either Jabaka, who even watches AA anymore now that UO is over? I mean, lots of people still watch him from what I can see. I mean, I've stopped watching him because I think 90% of what he says now is total rubbish, but...
Yeah, I'm the same. I watch occasional things that he makes, Hitman, but only occasionally. I think the reason that Unpopular Opinions was popular was the guests. So you got different opinions, and he doesn't do that anymore. Sorry, Mitch, you carry on.
I was going to say, the last thing I saw of him was him making a video about why Germans aren't as polite as people think. And go, the stereotype is that the Germans are meant to be impolite, if anything. So I don't know why. I don't know what the rationale for that video was of him.
No, certainly not. I mean, when I was a young dude, when you went to Spain on holiday or something, it was the Germans who were supposed to pinch all the sunbeds and all this kind of stuff. They weren't noted as being particularly polite, as far as I remember.
No, it's like from what I heard, it was the Austrians are nicer. Like they're a lot more laid back, and they're a lot more like us compared to the Germans in terms of being polite or being courteous. Whereas the Germans are known to be a lot more cold, reserved.
Yeah, and I mean, like all the rest of us, they vary,
Well, yeah, I mean, I know Northern Germans, especially you take Northern Germany, where the Anglo-Saxons originally came from. Yeah, they've got a very great sense of sort of brotherhood with us in a way. Like, I mean, you can harken back to the First World War, where you'd have Saxon regiments who didn't like fighting the British because they saw us as brothers, Anglo-Saxon heritage and whatnot. Whereas the Southern Germans, like the Bavarians, they didn't feel the same, but they were just like, they just want to get drunk on Oktoberfest. They don't particularly want to go to war. But then you've got the Prussians, who were just a lot more bloodthirsty. So,
I mean, Mitch, if you look at it, like in the Napoleonic era, Bavaria was mostly a French ally for the most part. They were mostly allies of Napoleon. But if you look at other places like Saxony and indeed Prussia, some of their regiments had Waterloo on their colours, same as our regiments did.
Yeah, but I remember, I think it's that They Shall Not Grow Old by Peter Jackson, 7 years back, where it basically said the Saxon regiments, they were generally nice. Like they'd be happy to, do Christmas truce with the Brits, or to be happy to come to an agreement regarding suspending hostilities. You've got Bavarians who they're a lot more laid back and chill compared to the Prussians, who were just a lot more bloodthirsty. Like the Prussians, because you got to factor that a lot of the Prussians, they probably had the same dislike of the British as Kaiser Wilhelm and that Alfred von Tirpitz had for us at that time, but it was an imperial rival. So the Prussians weren't as nice as other Germans were.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, I think I've met nice Germans and not so nice Germans. They vary, like we all do. I've met not so nice Englishmen, I have to tell you, but I'm sure you guys have too. So they vary. I tell you, one of the things I wanted to bring up is that how on earth, right? And I mean this seriously, chaps. How on earth did Angela, what's her name, the Labour politician woman?
Oh, Rayner.
Angela Rayner. How on earth did she get into the top 10 sexiest women in Britain? Did they only ask gay guys and lesbians?
Maybe she probably gives good head, I imagine.
But even so, I mean, presumably, if you're going to ask top 10 sexiest women in Britain, it's got to be based on what they look like, because the vast majority of people are never going to have met them, right? So leaving aside what her skills in that regard may or may not be, how on earth did she get in the top 10 sexiest women in Britain? And one of the other ones is like 60-something.
A lot of people will forgive many things for red hair, so I'm just assuming that.
Oh, listen, I'm fond of redheads, but they got to be a lot cuter than Angela Rayner, for God's sake. I mean, Angela Rayner's got a face like a boxer.
It's one thing to say about. I think didn't she become like a grandmother at the age of like 38 or something?
Yeah.
Then,
What a surprise! What a surprise! Just totally amazes me, that. Oh dear. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I mean, the whole list of the top 10 sexiest women in Britain was just ridiculous as far as I was concerned. And like I said, I'm 60. I'm not some young guy. I'm not like most of the guys on this stream. I'm 60. And honestly, none of those women in the top 10 would even get into my I might, if I was a bit drunk, list. You know what I mean? I just wouldn't. I'm sorry.
No. Davey, pre or post match Iron Duke?
So yeah, I don't know, guys. That one puzzled me greatly. It really did.
And no, what he's saying is, when you say she looks like she's been in the boxing match, we meant not pre-match or post-match.
Post-match. She's not cute, in my opinion. Not at all. Like, not even average. She doesn't even reach average facially. And I've never even bothered looking at the rest of her, I'm happy to say. But yeah, it's like I said, I'm 60 years old, and none of those women in the supposed top 10 sexiest British women, they'd all have to pay me, and I'd have to be a bit drunk, to be honest.
George
I'm not joking either. I'm being serious.
Jules Ryan is asking Kemi or Angela if you had to do one of them.
Neither, not a chance.
Yeah,
not a chance. Neither of them. No.
I mean, the only thing I'll give Rayner is that at least she's white.
Well, yeah, I guess. But the thing is, like, you know, when I was in the army, we had a type of woman called a double bagger, and this was a woman so ugly, right, that you put a paper bag over your head just in case the one over her head came off. And
God.
no, serious. And there were blokes, in the army, you get all sorts of people. There were blokes who would go for that sort of girl. I was never one of them myself. But I would say Angela Rayner's definitely a double bagger, But and Max Payne says, how old am I? I'm 60. I was 60 a few weeks ago. But sorry, none of those women in the so-called top 10 sexiest women in Britain, they wouldn't be getting in my bed, I can tell you, mate. Not a chance.
No. All I have to say is, I guess it's we have to be lorded over by the Red Queen.
Oh my God.
In the Red Queen of the Longhouse that is modern Britain.
Yeah, probably. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like redheads if they're cute redheads, for sure. They're cute redheads are beautiful, but she ain't one of them, in my humble opinion. But anyway. So, yeah, there's that, I guess. Jules Roy in the chat said Melania Trump turned 55 today, and Melania Trump is way cuter than Angela Rayner. Way cuter. So, and also has some style, again, unlike Angela Rayner. But anyway.
Well, I think you said what we were all thinking. I mean, is I heard a quote. Apparently, something along the lines of, "Oh, soldiers have the libidos of a rabbit." So I'll defer to you on this one.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, bear in mind, most of them are 18 to 22 or 23, and they're young blokes, and many of them are single. So yeah, for sure. That's why we have the double bagger phenomenon. So, but the people were honest about it. That girl is so ugly, I'm going to put a paper bag over my head in case her one comes off. So it's like people were honest about these things. So yeah. Oh look, Davey, I sometimes spend 6 months in the arsehole of Africa, in Southwest Africa. Okay, Namibia these days, and all the troops used to call it the arsehole of Africa. And sure, when I got back to civilization, I did want to see cute girls, but you understand, cute girls, not just any woman, cute girls. There is a difference. But then I was always pretty fussy, to be honest. But then I've gone my whole life without having an STD. So, and there's a reason I've gone my whole life without having an STD. It's because I was always very fussy. So, don't stick your dick in crazy. It's not a good idea.
Well, I was also about to say there's no reason why none of us should touch Angela Rayner because she's probably got an STD.
I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest. I wouldn't be surprised. She doesn't strike me as like the sort of person who you want having a high position in your government. But that's just me, So yeah, all right. I suppose we kind of segued onto this a bit. Hang on, Mitchie's saying to me in the private chat that I liked Attia in Rome. Yeah, I thought Attia, the actress who played Attia in the Rome TV series, I thought she was kind of cute, yeah. But I like girls with big tits, so I mean, I kind of like women with breasts. And she was generally reasonably cute, but I'm sure she was too old for you, Mitch. I mean, come on, you're a young guy. I get that. Octavia is hotter. Yeah, I suppose. If you're a young dude, probably true. But I'm not a young dude, as I said. So, you know, and I liked her to look at. I didn't like her character, Mitch. I'm not saying I liked her character. Her character was disgusting.
Well, I didn't find her attractive, like physically speaking, compared to Octavia.
No, but then, Mitch, you're probably the same age as Octavia, and I'm not. All right, and I'll be honest. Even when I was your age, I didn't go for like 18, 20-year-old chicks. I was never into 18 to 20-year-old chicks because they were always too stupid. That was my problem with girls of that age. I always liked women who were in their late 20s, early 30s. And basically, I've never changed. I still like women in their late 20s and their early 30s, even at my age. So, you know, it's I've just never altered in that sense. But only partly because women who are 18 to 22 tend to be a bit dumb, to be honest. They do.
Yeah,
and
you're
you
not
know,
wrong.
you can pretend you are not interested in their conversation, but you have to listen to them a lot more than you do other things, if you see what I'm saying. But anyway, I thought that was a good segue because one of the things we've been talking about on the Discord and what have you is, you know, young men these days. I see that many of them seem to think that going after slightly older women is a good thing to do. And then I see other people saying that older women are just as lefty as younger women are, which I'm not sure is necessarily true, but I think it sometimes is. And Max Payne's asking me if I'm married. I was married, Max Payne, and I have a son who is in his 20s now. So yes, I was married. I'm not married now, but I was. Been in quite a few long-term relationships, but you know.
I don't know. My perspective is, I don't know, like, I'm poor example now because I don't know, like,
Hang on, just 1 second, Mitch. I just want to say to Laurie in the chat, we are not talking about married older women. No one on this channel, and certainly not me, is ever going to suggest that you should get involved with married women or women in relationships. The only good advice my dad ever gave me about women was stay away from married women. So we are not talking about this. We're talking about single older women, not married ones. Okay, sorry, Mitch, carry on.
yeah, I mean, I'm taking the position of, oh, my generation of women are just really horrible to deal with a lot of the time because it's just like a lot of them just get so like they just hold on to the worst aspects of youth in terms of like the immaturity and they're more into hookups rather than anything majorly serious. So it's like filtering through a lot of the women of my generation is like it's like looking for a needle and it's like looking for a needle in a haystack, so to speak. Whereas older women, because I mean, let's say for example, like I'm 24, so let's say currently I'd just be looking for, let's say, I know women who are 26, 27, 5, but I wouldn't go like for a girl like me who's aiming to have children one day, yeah, I wouldn't go massively older because I mean I don't know I am currently single again, put that way. So like my woman is, I ain't with my woman in, but let's say yeah. So that would be like I don't know because I've like let's say for example, go in my position, like early 20s, yeah, I'd say for the time being just date slightly older. Like I say, just because yeah, our generation of women are just really horrible to deal with. But then again, you also got to factor that well. If I'm talking, let's say, I don't know, let's say for argument that 29-year-old woman, well, that's millennial territory. And yeah, millennials aren't exactly the greatest generation either, because I assume women at the moment are split horrible. Perhaps that might change because, I don't know, perhaps it might change. I mean, you got, for example, in America, you got loads of, like, I don't know, Zoomer women wearing bloody MAGA caps. And that's just, and a lot of that's just socially permissible stuff. Like, some of them are just doing it because, I don't know, they think it's because now it's a lot more socially acceptable to do that. So perhaps your situation will improve over time. But because I mean, but then again, it's also problem you've got is women are naturally conformist. So the fact that the culture is so left wing makes the women so bloody horrible to deal with. But let's say for argument's sake, we were to have knowledge of winning, and when things start shifting our way, then it'd be a case of women just naturally shift our way. But it's going to be a lot of patience to get to that point. So if you're young, if you're like Gen Z like me, yeah, it's not exactly looking good for the short term. But it's one of those things where, you just have to hope things improve, I suppose.
No. And sorry, something else I was going to say, but that was it. Because on a different topic, because Iron Duke at the Jabaka asked, is the Rome show worth watching? And yeah, I'd certainly recommend it. It's great. It's basically in a way
it's one of my favorite ever TV shows. So yeah, it is. It's pretty good. But don't expect it to be totally accurate. Like there's no Crassus in it, for example. The very rich dude who used to buy up fire damaged properties in Rome and who eventually got killed fighting the Persians. He's not in it.
I thought Crassus died before the events because isn't it something like
he didn't. No, he didn't.
Because it's like the first scene. I'm pretty sure shows of the Battle of Elysia, which I believe was 52 BC. I'm pretty sure Crassus died in 53 BC. I'm again my dates wrong.
No, Crassus did die in 53 BC at Carrhae. Yeah, so at the point the show begins, Crassus is already dead. And so the final thing that breaks the alliance between Caesar and Pompey is the death of Julia, Caesar's daughter, Pompey's wife.
Which is true, yeah. Which is true enough, because apparently Caesar and Pompey were kind of in love. Most Roman marriages, especially at that kind of high level, were political. But Pompey and Julia, Caesar's daughter, apparently did love each other. So
And yes, and very sadly, Ray Stevenson's performance is great, and sadly he passed the other year. Well, he died suddenly.
Yeah, not long ago, actually. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, Ray Stevenson as Pullo is one of the best characters in it, and of course Pullo and Varenus. Their names they come from Caesar's commentaries. They were two of Caesar's centurions in the Gallic Wars.
Yeah, because the thing with Titus Pullo is basically like you just have to imagine him as being like the archetype of the average British army soldier from like the Victorian period, just like dealing with like, barbarians and whatnot.
At the Jabaka has asked if there's any brown skins. Well, Varenus' wife is played by Indira Varma, who is a British Indian actress. But other than that, there's not really any non-white actors in it.
And she gets away with being Mediterranean, I'd say, Hitman, wouldn't you?
Yeah, she's half Italian.
Well, so she's British Indian, so yeah, she's got Indian heritage, but yeah, she's not totally Indian.
Yeah, and she gets away with it, and I have to say she's pretty cute too. By and large, the casting, there's no like blackwashing in that, really. Like the chick who plays Cleopatra, and it can absolutely get away with being a Macedonian Greek queen.
I personally disagree. I look at her and go, she could pass over as a Carthaginian. I don't think she could pass over as Greek.
Well, I don't know, Mitch. I've been in Greece and I've seen chicks who look like her, but yeah, all right.
I mean, it's like I remember like my most enduring image because I remember one time I was in Wales and I came across some army reservist woman and she was blonde. I thought, I I thought that was a very good.
You can find loads of cute blondes in Italy, but they're mostly in northern Italy. It has to be said, or they come from northern Italy because of as you all know, Mitch, the Germanic tribes who moved down that way are as Rome fell, basically.
Yeah, and the other thing was the other thing. So, like, because the thing about Rome was that you have historical stuff that's not true, but it doesn't really affect the show. It doesn't really affect how it's portrayed. So, for example, you have Octavian, who, he's put down as meeting his wife Olivia when he's like 20, and they go, no, they didn't get married until he was 26 because he had 2 wives before. But it doesn't really affect anything to me. But those 2 wives, I don't really think there's much known about them, so it doesn't really affect. Whereas Olivia, well, I mean, she was married to Augustus for like, I don't know, 50 years, something like that. So it's fair enough.
Oh, look, there's a lot of nonsense in Rome. Like Attia, for example, was nothing like the Attia in the series. The real Attia was. There's no evidence that she was a bit of a whore or any of that stuff. Okay.
Sorry, can I just come in? So obviously, because there's so many historical characters, Attia, she's what they did is they took 3 different historical personages and put it in one person.
Yes.
So she's representative of Attia, Caesar's niece, but she's also, because of Attia's relationship with Mark Antony, she's also representative of Antony's actual wife, whose name I forget. So she's kind of 2 different people in one, and it's obviously fair enough because if they had 3 other characters, it'd be too confusing with what's going on. I can forgive. It's a change I can forgive. Ultimately, I think with the accuracy of the show, I would say it's reasonably accurate. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's reasonably accurate.
I think the settings and some of the stuff they try to show you about the religion and that sort of stuff, I think those things are quite accurate. It's not historically accurate in the sense that every character is exactly as they were. Like, there's no evidence, for example, that what's his name? But the guy who became Augustus. There's no evidence he slept with his Octavian. There's no evidence Octavian slept with his sister. Really, there is.
No, of course not. I mean, maybe a better term for Rome is that it's probably more historically authentic than historically accurate. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, 100% him, and that's the word I was searching for. Thank you. You're entirely right. But yeah, it's a good show. It's well written. They don't blackwash things in general, and it's one of my favorite TV shows. I started watching it with a chick not so long ago, and she keeps moaning because I won't finish it. But the trouble is, I've watched both seasons twice, and the unfortunate thing is that they cancelled it at the beginning of the second season. So the second season is much more rushed than the first one. And they were originally planning like 5 seasons of it. But if you haven't seen HBO's Rome, I would say it's great. And it's way better than Game of Thrones, for example. Way better.
Yeah.
Really, really, it's a very superior TV series.
Yeah, I would say like with Game of Thrones, it's just a lot more. I don't mind the jaded part of like Game of Thrones in terms of how you get like multi-dimensional characters, but it's not really something that's inspiring. And B, there's a lot of degeneracy involved in some scenes had to be cut down from the original way they're going to show it because it was taking its toll on the actors and actresses involved. So some of the writers were a bit iffy.
Listen, there's sex in it and nudity in it, but I'm not particularly against sex and nudity in movies, but whatever.
No, it's like so. For example, there was a scene where Natalie Dormer's character, then Natalie Dormer, who played Anne Boleyn in the Tudors, I mean, yeah, I think anyone would like her, but like, there's a scene where she's meant to be seduced, basically like a 13-year-old boy or something, and it's just like, and apparently it was meant to be portrayed as like full on like sex scene, but of course you got like a 20-something-year-old woman seducing a 13-year-old boy.
That
It's
never
probably not
happens. Never happens. We never hear of female school teachers doing those things, do we? And when they do, they get so hard hit. Except they don't. They just get the sack. But you know, if you're going to write fiction, and I'm going to bring this to Aaron Hook in a minute, because Aaron Hook is our literary critic, I guess. If you're going to write historical fiction, you sometimes have to write about stuff that's unpleasant if you're going to make it realistic. Aaron, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I entirely agree. If you're going to portray, if obviously with historical fiction, it's not going to necessarily be historically accurate. If you're going to make it historically authentic, you do have to portray the full gamut of what happened, and quite a lot of that is not particularly pleasant. And that's a big problem with a lot of modern historical fiction, is they're trying to whitewash it or sort of play down the sort of reality of the past, and it doesn't work. And so
if you're looking at stuff like Rome, which is set, in the Caesar Augustus period, when the Principates was first set up, this is not a Christian nation. It doesn't have Christian morals either. I'm sorry, Aaron, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. When you're dealing with the past, you're dealing with, especially when you go back that far, you're dealing with people who have a completely different moral worldview to modern people, or for that matter, a different moral worldview of people in the 1950s, say. And so their attitudes towards sexual relations in Rome at the time were very different, and sort of it is sort of wholly unacceptable now. But if you don't show that, you're not showing the full picture of the past. And so you should show it. That doesn't mean you have to approve of it, but not showing it is just is as much a disservice as censoring it. It's as much a disservice and wrong as showing it and apparently being approving of it.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think Mitch makes a good point in the chat as well. Like the Romans thought the Greeks were too gay. Frankly, they did. Anglo Guna and other people asking me, how do you join my Discord? You can't. It's invitation only. How you join my Discord is you become friends with me or somebody like Mitch or Hitman or Aaron Hook, and they like you and trust you enough that they invite you to the Discord. Other than that, you can't. It's a invitation only Discord.
A very sensible.
And there's a reason for that, boys, because even my Discord has been infiltrated by lefties once. So yeah.
Yeah, the better less said of that, the better.
Exactly, Hitman. But yeah, if you want to join my Discord, you have to become mates with one of the people who appears with me on my streams, and they have to trust you enough that they'll say, yeah, I will recommend this dude, and that's how you join. Anglo Guna 21, I'll take that as a red until I know you better. I believe that Semiogogue is right in that everyone's a Fed until they prove themselves not to be. Basically, that's my view.
I mean, to get my view, if your name is Anglo Guna 21, then you do sound pretty subversive. So
yeah. One of them, Max Payne, got in by lying, basically, So that's how that stuff always happens. That people lie. Sadly, you have to be around quite a long time, and people have to trust you, Max. That's how it happens.
I mean, you know, don't ask dodgy questions. Don't ask people to do weird things. You know, just generally be reasonable and not a spurg.
All perfectly correct, Hitman. Yeah, I mean that's my view. The people in my Discord are people I trust, basically. And if I don't trust you, you don't get in my Discord. It's as simple as that. But anyway, I think Aaron was entirely correct about this stuff. I mean, look, if you go to Pompeii, which I've been lucky enough to visit, and you go to like there's at least one brothel site you can go there, which has got loads of quite explicit illustrations on the walls and what have you. You can't show ancient Rome if you're not going to show that stuff. You just can't. I'm sorry.
Mm.
And I like my historical fiction to be realistic. You know, it's like if you're writing about the Royal Navy of Nelson's era, and you can go one or two ways. You can go the way the C.S. Forrester went with Hornblower, who doesn't really much mention the lower deck, like he doesn't much mention the ordinary sailors. Or you can go the way that Patrick O'Brien went with his Master and Commander series, which the excellent movie is based on. And you know, those guys, when they went ashore, what the hell do you think they did? They went drinking and chasing women. I mean, you know, they were young blokes. That's what they did. I'm sorry. And you can't write accurate historic fiction unless you show that.
I would be interested in getting your opinion, Iron Duke, because we've talked about Rome and you know, sex and TV. Have you watched the Spartacus TV show at all?
Yeah, I've watched all of them. I didn't think they were very good, but I have watched them for sure. Yeah.
Okay, because I want your opinion because I watched it a couple of years ago, and so Spartacus, for those that know, was another of these ancient Rome TV shows that centered on the gladiator Spartacus who led the slave revolt against Rome, and it was in. Oh, I'm not surprised you know Iron Duke because that show was mostly filmed, I think, in Australia, and a lot of Australian actors are in
New
it.
Zealand, New Zealand, not Australia. New Zealand.
I'm sorry. Well, Australian actors are in it as well because of the location.
There's a few, but they're mostly Kiwis, and they have Kiwi accents.
Right.
You can tell if you live in Australia, you can tell a Kiwi accent from an Australian accent. You probably can't if you're a Pom, but you can otherwise.
Oh, well, fair enough. And yeah, as you probably remember, that show is a bit similar to Rome, as in it's got a lot of violence, got a lot of sex, but I really think they kind of upped the ante with that show to the point where some of it made me feel a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, I thought it was crap, to be honest with you, mate. I didn't like it. And the Kiwi accents really it made it difficult for me. I can't imagine ancient Romans with New Zealand accents, to be honest.
Well, the more thing I found subversive is that, well, you know, in Rome, at least all of the sex is heterosexual, where they tried to, in Spartacus, they tried to shove like this gay plot line in where you've got like this, they've got this is really funny. They got like this Maori actor to play a Syrian slave who then has this like gay relationship with this German guy, and it's just like,
oh, lovely,
God.
lovely.
Oh yeah, and then I remember in the earliest series, and I think in the early series they had like two, like an African with like a Carthaginian gay, and it's like, oh my God.
Yeah, no, I'll be honest with you, Hitman. I would have fast forwarded through any of that stuff. Because I don't watch TV. My TV, I think, has been turned on once in about 3 years. I've got one, but it's not even plugged in. But yeah, I would have fast forwarded through anything that was gay, because like two guys kissing actually makes me physically sick. I want to vomit when I see two guys kissing. Two girls kissing I can live with quite happily, but two guys kissing makes me want to vomit, to be honest. It does. So someone's asking, are Kiwis as polite as Canadians? Don't know, mate. I've only known some Kiwis, not that many, to be honest, but some, and they've all been pretty good guys, the ones I've known. But I just don't watch homosexual stuff. Don't want to watch it. Like, I've never seen Brokeback Mountain, and I'm pretty sure I'll go to my grave without ever seeing it, because I don't need to see it, you know?
Well, I don't want to watch it either. I mean, when I watched Spartacus, I wasn't expecting them to shove like gay crap into it, so that's what surprised me.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I mean, Spartacus, to be fair, was it was a lot more sensationalist than Rome, if you know what I mean.
No, that's fair. I mean, the one redeeming feature is at the end when Crassus is victorious and he just nails them all to crosses.
Yeah, indeed.
You know, the good guy won in the end.
Oh, look, there's a scene in Rome where Mark Antony gets two whores to have a sword fight, and actually one of them cuts one of them on the arm. And you know what? I could see some really rich Roman doing something like that. Maybe, yeah. But it could, just because he thought it was funny. Yeah, maybe.
Well, I mean, Mark Antony is like, I've heard him described as basically like a martial knight of that period where, you know, he'd be a good, like, you know, he loved to fight, and also while he was a damn good reliable soldier for season, you know, if you dispatched him to guard a flank or whatever, he could be trustworthy, but he wasn't exactly a mastermind like Octavian was.
No. Yeah, absolutely. But also, don't ever forget, and this is another thing that Rome doesn't really bring out, is that Octavian very much depended on, oh, crikey, what's his name?
Agrippa.
Agrippa.
Yeah, he very much depended on Agrippa, who came from a rather lower social class than Octavian did. And Agrippa was like the military mastermind for Octavian.
Yeah, because the only sin of it is you got Octavian basically basically he just like expels Mark Antony because Mark Antony is having sex with his mom, as well as being cuckolded by Agrippa and all this. And he just portrays Agrippa as being somewhat, I don't know, not really as assertive as historically was. Like,
yeah, he's shown as a kind of innocent type guy, which I'm not by any means sure he was, but whatever, you know.
Well, someone like Octavian, like if you're Octavian's right-hand man, yeah, you can't be that innocent, boyish kind of guy. Like you have to be a guy who's willing to get his hands dirty, so to speak.
Yeah, and he was a good military commander, Agrippa. He much better than Octavian, who really wasn't much of a military guy, to be honest. Octavian was more of a political guy than a military guy. But you know, you can look at like Claudius, for example. You know, the Graves novel that was turned into a series.
Yes.
And again, not totally accurate, but it's still very well made and very well done. But it's by no means like we can say, oh yeah, that's historically accurate, because we don't even have enough sources even for that pretty well-known period, you know.
I mean, in defense of Robert Graves' Iron Duke for I Claudius, he did base it largely off of Suetonius, so he is basing it off the direct primary sources of the ancient authors. So, I mean, okay, they could be a bit sensationalist, but I brought again, it's historically authentic, if maybe not fully accurate. But again, we're probably never going to know what the full picture is unless we get the ability to travel back in time. So it's as good as we're gonna get.
Yeah, but you know, you've got to realize that when you're looking at the ancient world, as I'm sure Aaron and Mitch know, as you do, Hitman, that you know we've only got a few sources, even for well-known periods, like between Caesar and the end of Augustus, which is a very well-known period in terms of the ancient world. But we only have a few sources even for that. And then
so
you can look at a great emperor, a really great emperor like Trajan, who took the Roman Empire to its greatest extent. And we've almost nothing on that bloke. Almost no sources have survived.
yeah, I think like the funniest thing I saw was I saw some Redditors complaining about Julius Caesar because apparently Julius Caesar said that he killed off 1 million Gauls in his conquest. Now,
Oh dear. Oh
yeah, and
dear.
it's like, well, it's one thing, and everyone's like saying, "Oh, well, Caesar was even bragging about it," and I go, "Well, yeah, because as a Roman, he would have grown up on stories about how
Yeah.
terrifying the Gauls were." Because you got to factor that the one reason why the Romans expanded was because they were terrified of the Gauls back when was it Brennus sacked the city in like 400 BC or something like that. So that story was further etched into Roman consciousness as we never want this to repeat again. And this is why the Romans are so very harsh when they fight against Vercingetorix.
There's a really good channel on YouTube which I very much like called The Cost of Glory. Go look at that, which talks quite a lot about Caesar. And I'm a big fan of the Cost of Glory YouTube channel. Go and check that out, boys. It's really good. Someone's asking me my thoughts on Thomas 777. I don't have any thoughts on Thomas 777 because I don't know him, so I don't know.
Oh, well, yeah, he's got some interesting knowledge on World War II and other interesting subjects. I mean, if you watch Pete Quinones, Pete has him on quite a lot, and I always think Thomas is interesting.
Yeah, I think he varies. Depends what he's talking about, like all of us. But I don't know him really, so I don't really have much of an opinion on him. I think he dresses a bit strangely sometimes, but that's just me. Pete Quinones, I watch. I don't always agree with him, but I watch him, and some of his stuff is pretty good. He did a really good series on the Spanish Civil War, which was interesting.
Yeah, well, also being with Thomas, I mean, my friend Hunger's met him in IRL, and he says he's a great guy. So,
oh, cool. Well, there you go. Your mate knows him better than I do, mate. So I'm not. I don't have an opinion on him because I've never met him. So, you know, I don't think he's always right. But then none of us are always right. Woodpit 420. You know, none of us are always right. I don't expect anyone to be always right. I expect people to get most things more or less right. And if they do that, then I'll go, yeah, all right then. You know?
no, exactly.
But I mean, you know, history is it's subjective. So you read the history and you make your mind up. Now, if you're completely like left field or right field, you're probably totally wrong. But there's plenty of room for disagreement on history, like in the middle ground, where, you know, and especially if you're talking about ancient history, because we have so few sources that have survived. Sorry,
well,
carry on, man.
it's also one of the things where, you know, let's say for argument's sake, you know, you take, let's say, Boudicca's revolt, right? Generally, people will trust the Roman historians because the Roman historians will be like, oh, well, this rebellion was caused by some of our guys being completely callous and overplayed their hands regarding the natives. But then Boudica did all this atrocities, therefore we put her down. It's just like that's why people trust the Roman historians a lot more and are willing to put a lot more weight into them because, well, you know, they'll give you the reasons, but then they'll just brag about putting it down. So it's like you can generally trust such things happened, to say the least.
Yeah. I mean, Mitch, I'll give you a much more recent example. You can be a British guy looking at the Anglo-Boer War, 1899-1902, and you can agree on the facts with an Afrikaner who's looking at that same war, but you might have different conclusions purely because of your heritage, you know.
Well, it's kind of like, for example,
Which is not to say either of them are wrong, but you're going to have slightly different conclusions, you know.
well, it's like let's say the Battle of Teutoburg Forest, where Arminius destroyed 3 legions
Yep.
of the Valos. I mean, from my perspective, right, I would say that the Battle of Teutoburg Forest is a good thing, because if the Romans had expanded all the way to the Elbe River, then England would not exist. Like, the Anglo-Saxons would be subjugated by Rome, and England would not exist in that timeline. Whereas, because of the Battle of Teutoburg Forest, the Romans had delivered themselves to the Rhine, and that meant that the Germanic invasions later on happened, and that created Europe as we know it. In terms of, like, country, like, you have countries like Italy, France, Spain, Portugal, and whatnot, like England, etc., created them the way they are because of Germanic invasion tribes and whatnot. So, whereas, let's say, someone who's a lot more pro-Rome, they would look upon the Battle of Teutoburg Forest as, oh, well, this is just a matter of Romans being only bested by deceit and intrigue and so on. Because Arminius, of course, he deceived an entire Roman army into defeat and so on. Whereas I look at it, because I I can love the ancient Rome, but meanwhile, I have to also imagine, like, I suppose or not, I've got no Italian blood in my veins, so I can only look upon it as an outsider. I'm larger Celtic and Germanic stock, genetically speaking, heritage-wise. So if I'm going to look up, for example, a battle between, let's say, the Saxons and the Romans, I'm going to side with the Saxons, even if I got my own sympathies towards the Romans, because of course the Romans, built up a massive civilization and so on.
Yeah, look, no arguments against that. I would just say, I think if the Romans hadn't lost at Teutoburg, that would not have stopped the Saxons invading Britain. I don't think it would have even stopped the end of the Roman Empire. It might have delayed it a bit, which might or might not have been a good thing. But I don't think it would have overall changed history, because the thing was, you still had, like, the Huns and everybody pushing everyone to the west from the steppes of Central Europe and what is now Russia. So I don't necessarily think it would have changed history. It might have meant that Rome would fall a bit more slowly, and it might have meant that Germany might have been more of a Latin nation. Would that have been a bad thing for Britain? I'm not sure. There's too many butterflies when you get to that stage, Mitch. There's so many historical butterflies at that stage that you can't tell, whether it would have been good for Britain or bad for Britain. You just can't.
Well, the thing is, so let's say, for example, Rome were to expand right up to where the Anglo-Saxon lands were, like in northern Germany.
Yeah, but also, Mitch, before you go on, don't forget the Romans never occupied Scandinavia, and originally a lot of these people came from Scandinavia. So yeah, all right. Sorry, carry on.
The other thing. So the thing is, for example, the Gauls, they were conquered by Caesar, and the assimilation process that turned the Gauls into basically what we call today the French. They speak a Latin language, started under Augustus. So if the Germanic tribes were conquered by, let's say, a Drusus or someone like that, it would have meant that northern Germany would be a lot more Latinized, like Gaul was. Because Britain, for example, wasn't as Latinized by the Roman Empire, because the thing was too distant, and plus also you got a factor that, so, for example, you have Gaul, well, southern Gaul is a lot more Mediterranean climate, so Roman settlement.
Absolutely, Mitch. Yeah. The elites in Britain spoke Latin. The ordinary people, by and large, didn't. No, absolutely.
No. So you'd have cities like Londinium, Camalodunum, and perhaps Eboracum at the stretch, because Eboracum was more of a military garrison site. perhaps
Where
speaking
there
Latin.
would have been, but there would have been a lot of people speaking Latin around military garrison sites because you were going to make your money off the soldiers. So yeah.
Well, towards the latter end of the empire, like because one thing to bear in mind is like so towards because of course the Romans started relying a lot more on Germanic mercenaries. You probably would have had to learn Proto-Germanic to some extent, at least, because perhaps those
Oh
Germanic
yeah,
mercenaries.
maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Perhaps it was only the officers spoke Latin, whereas the rank and file Germanic mercenaries they wouldn't have bothered learning Latin because they were just like,
I don't know, mate. I more picture even the later what's the correct word? I think even the later Roman auxiliaries, I picture them more like the French Foreign Legion. I really do. I reckon the guys who joined that probably did learn reasonable Latin. I'm not
well,
saying like
yeah,
literary Latin, but they probably learned quite a lot of Latin because all the orders were given in Latin. And like I said, just like the French Foreign Legion, if you join the French Foreign Legion, you have to learn French. And the French Foreign Legion have a way of teaching people French pretty quickly, actually.
yeah, because the thing is, so one thing like so there are quite a few words from Latin that came in from Proto-Germanic, but there's quite a few words in Proto-Germanic that later seeps, for example, High German or into English that originally came from that. So, for example, the word mile, right, the word mile has the same root as the word million or
Mm-hmm.
milli, like millimeter. Because mile technically reads as 1,000 paces as like a unit of
Yeah,
like in
sure.
distance. And also you have it's like you have the word campus, like a university campus. Campus originally meant battlefield, but it got borrowed into Old English, for example, as meaning like camp, like a campsite.
Yeah, but
Like,
there's also the Campus Marius outside Rome, or it used to be outside Rome. It's not now; it's inside. But that was like where all the Romans used to go to vote, and where the Roman armies used to form up in the Republican days.
yeah, the other thing was you have words like well, our word wine comes from the Latin vino, and that's like back in Old English times, like before Old English even existed as a separate language by its own self. And you also got what was the other one? Salt.
And all Mitch, and also don't forget, we had the Roman warm period, and so you could actually grow pretty good wine vines. You could make pretty good wine in Britain during the Roman era. There
Yeah,
were quite a lot of vineyards in Britain, and they produced. I know there are a couple of vineyards still in Britain today, but the Roman era, it was warmer than it is today, despite all the fucking net zero propaganda bullshit we get. It was actually warmer in the Roman era, and you could easily grow grapevines and produce decent wine in Britain back then.
yeah. I've heard apparently. I can't remember where I read it because I mean, it was mainly said. I know the Huns were known for it, but I think like Germanic tribes, like the Anglo-Saxons, like the Saxons, for example. One way that the Romans used to ply them off was just give them barrels of wine because wine, which is so enjoyed by pretty much every barbarian tribe,
Yeah,
became
because
this
it was stronger than the small beer, which all the Germanics had beer, including the English, the Anglo-Saxons. And they all had beer, but wine was a bit stronger, and there were no spirits in those days. They hadn't been invented yet.
Yeah, because I mean back then it would even mead would be the only alcohol that really would
Yeah,
be too.
which is alcoholic, but not as alcoholic as wine is. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean the other thing was yeah, I don't know what I don't know what I don't know what I don't know. I suppose like I don't know. but perhaps let's say for argument's sake, Splendid Isolation. I suppose you could do like a video, like a stream one day, like I don't know, medium term future, I don't know, like a month away from now or somewhere, whatever, about Rome and Britain in terms of I don't know, certain misconceptions people might have about it, or I don't know, just talking about.
Up for it, Mitch. If you'll come on as a guest, I'm totally up for that, mate. Anyone on my Discord who suggests a historical stream, I'll basically do it. But all I ask is you come on as a guest if you're going to suggest it, because I am not an expert on everything by any means. So yeah, I'll do that if you want to do it, Mitch, for sure.
Yeah, how do you not? I don't. I mean, in terms of like whiskey, I mean, I'm pretty sure. I mean, I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure whiskey. It was over like late medieval ages, I believe it was, or early modern.
Yeah.
It was something like that when it was created. Yeah. I know gin was used, for example, because we have a phrase Dutch courage, because
18th,
gin
that's 16th, 17th, 18th century. It's way after the Roman era.
Yeah, because the thing was, you have, because it's also you have a phrase forlorn hope, because that comes from Dutch, forlorn hope or something like that. And also that Dutch used to export as gin, because during the Civil War, both sides were drinking gin just before they had to charge against one another, especially if you're in the forlorn hope section of your army.
And in World War One, guys were given a rum ration before they went over the top. So
yeah.
So yeah, listen, I just want to bring Hitman and Aaron into this because we've been going on for a while. Guys, do either of you two have anything to say about this stuff we've been talking about, which I think is interesting for sure?
Well,
not really, but you're far more knowledgeable on it than I am.
Sorry,
I was going to say about the wine. Well, Britain producing wine actually carried on into the early medieval period during the medieval warm period. It was when you had about the time of the Black Death and the beginning of the Little Ice Age in the 14th century is where that dies out, sadly.
For sure. Guys, I would just say, because we're coming towards the end of the stream, we've been going for almost 2.5 hours. I did a stream last week for Anzac Day, and not all that many people have watched it, but I would suggest you do go and watch it. And one of the reasons I would say that is the Magnus Furious is a guest on that stream, and it's the first stream he's done in quite a while. And I really like Magnus Furious. He's a good Aussie bloke. He's also of Italian heritage, which kind of makes it quite interesting from this stream. Like, I know Magnus is a big fan of the Roman Empire, obviously, like most patriotic guys with Italian heritage. But yeah, go and check that out, boys. Magnus hasn't done a stream for quite a while. And I was very happy to have him as a guest on that stream. And he's also a really good military historian. Like, Magnus's military history is very good. I admire it a great deal. So yeah, do go and check that out.
No, he's a good guy. I've had him on my channel a few times. So.
Oh, cool, Hitman, cool. Yeah, he is, but he hasn't done anything for quite a while. He's had a bit of a hiatus, shall we say. But I was very glad that he came back for that stream, and he had a lot of good, sensible things to say about modern Australia that I entirely agreed with for the most part, to be honest. But yeah, go and check that out. Guys, anything else we would like to bring up before we finish? And then after that, I'll ask you to plug your channels and all that kind of stuff. But anything else you would like to bring up before we close?
No, not really.
Hey, man?
No.
Okay, hang on, let me just check what's happened to Mitch. All right, Mitch is left, but he doesn't normally plug anything because, for reasons I don't understand, Mitch doesn't have his own channel. He should, in my opinion, but he doesn't. But thank you very much, Mitch, for joining us. Mitch is one of the mainstays of this channel, to be honest. All right, guys. Hitman, would you like to plug your channel, please?
Yes, I have a channel where I'm currently doing a series on modern Iran. I did an episode earlier looking at the Middle Safavid period, so looking at Abbas the Great and the height of modern Iranian power, and of course, with that series, I'll be going all the way up until the modern Iran and at the very least the death of the Ayatollah Khomeini in 1989. So if you find it interesting, give that a watch. I have many other streams on many other topics on my channel, so you can go and give that a watch as well.
Yeah, Hitman's got a really good channel. He's a bit of an Arabist, which is why he has Glob as his avatar. The great General Glob, who was a British general in charge of the Arab Legion. Also big World War II hero for Britain, but yeah. Aaron, would you like to plug your channel, sir?
Yes, thank you. My channel is Aaron James Hook on YouTube. I review books, mainly, but also do films. And I did a live stream earlier this evening on science fiction films with my friend Sean. There's two authors, Steve Stark and John Davies, which was really enjoyable. So, that's worth a watch if you're a fan of science fiction films.
Yeah, again, Aaron Hook's got an excellent channel. I did a stream with him on Rorke's Drift on the channel, and to let people understand, Aaron Hook is a real relative of Henry Hook, VC, from Rorke's Drift, which I reckon is pretty damn cool. Wish I was a relative of Henry Hook, but anyway. And who was nothing like the guy in the film, which we explain if you go and watch that video. But anyway, he was actually a very good soldier. But anyway, cool. Thank you very much to Mitch, to Hitman, and to Aaron Hook for joining me this evening. You guys are welcome always on my streams, and without my guests, the streams would be meaningless, pretty much. So yeah. I would just say go and check out the Anzac Day stream I did with Marcus Furious. Very glad to see him streaming again. He's a good bloke. And I'm going to play us out with a bit of a tune. Oh, and before I do that, on Wednesday, I've got our regular history stream coming up. And this Wednesday, it's going to be the Anglo-German naval race circa 1900, 1914, and why it was a total disaster for the Germans, but was also pretty much a disaster for the Brits. But for the Germans, it was completely a disaster. But it was, because of the outcome of it, it was very largely a disaster for Britain as well. But anyway, join us on Wednesday at the same time as this stream for that. And now I'm going to play us out with a tune. As soon as it loads, anyway. There we go.
Death alone comes suddenly and makes a man to know himself. He tells the proud and insolent, and at an instant humbles them. The lofty and the low are one to the brief touch of sharp-honed steel. And on this chill October morn, Raleigh he comes for thee. O thou that spanned the far-flung globe, and compassed wild Guiana's shore, thou that once held the Queen's dread heart, then tainted to the town's fact, thou that did marry once for love, and in the Commons love still lies, yet on this chill October morn, Death Raleigh comes for thee. The time, the spirit, yes, the age, resplendent in a single man, when men would wager unto death on bold adventures die, that would for glory and for gain rewrite the history of worlds. Thou wast all that, and yet this morn chill death it comes for thee. The race that made small England great, amongst them you the chiefest man, but late walled up in a flint-stark tower, thou'st watched them shade away. Brave Drake and Hawkins Frobisher, thy kinsman Grenville of revenge, are now but clay, now with them join, for death it comes for thee. Farewell, the age of Bess is dead, and tramped upon by braggart Scott. Farewell, our Raleigh, with your loss, the final curtains down. You Raleigh, gentleman of fortune glorious, you carved your name, and never shall those letters fade, though death it comes for thee. Death along comes suddenly, and makes a man to know himself. He tells the proud and insolent, and at an instant humbles them. The lofty and the low are one to the brief touch of sharp-honed steel. And on this chill October morn, Raleigh, he came for thee.
Okay, that was from Patriotic Archive, big time friend of the channel, member of my Discord. Great music on his channel. And of course, Sawar Raleigh, who famously put his cloak in front of a puddle so Queen Elizabeth I didn't have to walk in the water, was eventually murdered by James I, the first Scottish King of England, because he was trying to have an alliance with the Spanish bastards. So, yeah. And also because an officer of Raleigh's disobeyed him. And Raleigh didn't deserve to be executed at all. And James I was a nasty dude who was probably gay. But anyway, I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big fan of Charles I either. But I would have still been a royalist just because I'm a traditionalist and he was the king. But I didn't really like him. But I don't really like Cromwell either. So, whatever. Thank you very much to my guests, Mitch, Hitman, and Aaron Hook. Thanks for joining us. Do come and join us on Wednesday. I think this is going to be a good stream because the Anglo-German naval race between 1895, 1900, and 1914 was the main reason Britain ended up in World War One, which was the original sin of Britain and the Empire. If we'd have stayed out of it, Britain would have been as powerful in 1918 as we were in 1914. But we didn't, and it was a disaster. Come and join us for that stream. Hopefully, Hitman and Aaron will join us for that because they're both into their history and politics and what have you of that era. So I hope that happens. And Mitch, of course. Boys, go up. Don't let the bastards grind you down, and see you on Wednesday.
Go well, people.
Good night.